Hi everyone, so lately we had this Abattoir of Zir update. You might have seen this already, I covered this in another video. And to recap, they nerfed monster damage by 20%, making it much easier to survive. And one has like basically plus 25% EHP, and also they buffed glyph XP. So at tier 5 you get roughly like 50% more, at tier 10 already like around triple, and at tier 20 even like quintuple compared to pre-patch. The other tiers are kind of like spaced out in between, but it goes significantly faster now to level the glyph. However, it's still quite a grind, and we'll probably not see a level 200 glyph by the end of the season. But at least level 50 is relatively realistic if you're dedicated. Now, for this video here, I want to actually go through those other changes they've made, which is that they reduced the difficulty scaling for the earlier tiers. And you can see this in action here right now. I basically went in with my TB rogue and I tried out tier 1 to tier 10 progression basically to see how the difficulty feels. And one thing you may notice here is that the monster level is much lower now. You see here it's only 144, where previously it was, I think, 155 for a tier 1 Abattoir of Zir. So the minimum entry level is much lower basically, and anyone can kind of go through at least tier 1 or the lower tiers and try to get that glyph and rank it up a little bit. So this is really useful. It also allows you to just like boost your character through those glyph levels really quickly. So instead of grinding out nightmare dungeons, you can grind out the lower tiers of Abattoir of Zir and get much more glyph XP. And on a fast build, you can see here, you can complete those lower tiers in like as little as like 2.5, 3 minutes or so, maybe up to 4 minutes or so on like the slower builds, and kind of grind it out. So it is definitely much easier now. I noticed I was basically nearly like one-shotting elites and these lower tiers, and going all the way up to even tier 10 with like a stronger build was not really such a big deal. So I kind of like progressed through those different tiers here, and you see that, this is like tier 3 that I complete in like 3 minutes, and this is like a tier 4. I kind of like went like tier by tier here. Yeah, it's definitely much easier now, but also the ramp up of difficulty is way faster now in those early tiers. So going from 1 to 10 has like a much like spikier difficulty curve basically than previously. So this is something to keep in mind, because they reduced the lower end of the Abattoir of Zir tiers. It has become a much harder to move up like all the way like to tier 10, and then from tier 10 onwards the old scaling is still in place, which is completely unchanged. And this makes it so that you're probably gonna hit a wall really hard, especially on the weaker builds or on the weaker characters, if you're not like fully decked out and stuff, than you otherwise would. So especially for those builds that actually can't really go past tier 9 or past tier 10, it's gonna be a significant brick wall basically that you're hitting. But in general, it's definitely a good move, I think, that they made it a bit easier to get into the system, try it out and allow people to kind of like push up a little bit at least, where previously I heard from a lot of people that they couldn't even completed tier 1 because it was really tough, and they died to bloodseekers, and it's unfun and stuff like that. And I can definitely notice that it does ramp up a lot, but it also is relatively easy early on for the first at least like 5 tiers or so, I'd say. Now there is another thing also that I want to talk about, which is that it seems there is like certain breakpoints with monster HP. So this is also something I noticed when I'm playing, but I've seen this sheet here that Rob made, so shout out to Rob. He collected a bit of data there. I'm not 100% sure if this is like accurate, but we have this sheet here where first of all we have the glyph XP, so if you're curious about those, these are the confirmed values, and also the HP scaling. So it seems like per tier the HP scaling is roughly 20%, but there is a breakpoint every 5 tiers. And this is something that's relatively noticeable when you push up. So it seems like roughly every 5 tiers you have like a 100% HP jump, and not just, for example, a 20% HP jump. We don't know if those numbers are exactly accurate, but it definitely feels that way, that there are these kind of breakpoints at tier 5, at tier 10, 15, 20, and then eventually 25, giving you a much higher difficulty spike in terms of how much more damage you have to bring to actually complete the run. Recently, I completed a tier 15 on my rogue, and that was definitely a really tough one. But the thing is that this is kind of like one of these breakpoints, and from there on, I could potentially think about a 16, a 17, and so on. So I will definitely try that. But, trying to hit that tier 10 is definitely a really big wall. And this means that when you are trying to grind out glyphs, you probably want to stay away from those multiples of 5 and rather have like, the multiples of 5 minus 1. So you might want to grind tier 4, you might want to grind tier 9, or potentially even on a strong build tier 14 to avoid that huge difficulty spike. Because, for example, for the glyph XP, it doesn't actually go up in the same way. You see here that, for example, compared to the previous tier, here we get plus 200, plus 300, plus 500, plus 800, plus 1100. So it kind of like slowly ramps up the glyph XP, and it doesn't have like an insane jump in terms of the rewards at those multiples of 5. You see here, it kind of just has this glyph progression, and you get more and more and more. There's no like extra reward for this extra difficulty. So if you are grinding out your glyph, and if you're grinding out Abattoir in general, you know, for whatever loot or so, then you probably want to do, you know, tier 4 if you can, or tier 9, or, you know, something that is not like 5 or 10, basically. So I kind of wanted to point this out here. It's kind of important, I believe, because you might think that, oh, I'm going to try tier 10s. It's like a nice round number. But exactly, this is something that I noticed as well when I was doing my runs here. So, for example, on my TB rogue, I was able to stay at like around a 3 to 4 minute time on average, all the way up to like tier 8 or so, or tier 7 at least. And then it kind of like went up from there. Like, you know, a tier 9 was like, you know, 5+ minutes already on average. And then like a tier 10 was like 6-7 minutes or so. So it kind of like ramps up from there, and really hard. And when you grind out your own glyph, you probably want to stay at a tier where you can still comfortably do like, you know, consistent 3-4 minute, maybe 5-minute runs or so. Not really try to grind out the highest tiers necessarily, because they might be inconsistent, you might rip, you know, might lose the sigil and the powder, and also you might just like fail the run due to the timer, which is obviously the worst case scenario, basically. So I just want to get this out there, so for people to understand like how this game works. One little interesting tidbit is also that tier 25 seems to be absolutely undoable, so we're not going to see that. Apparently there has been a tier 24 clear. I watched that yesterday in China, like a barb has managed to do a tier 24, but it seems like the ramp up for 24 to 25 is extreme. Like we're talking about like way more than 500% actually. Seems more like a times 10 or times 20 at the very minimum. So, you know, this 24 was done, you know, very closely, basically, and there is no more real power to gain on that magnitude that will allow us to potentially clear 25. So I think this is actually intended to be unbeatable outside of exploits. So kind of curious to see that at least. And this is also it for what I have here to share with my testing from the patch so far. So it's just something for you to take away. Stay away from those multiples of 5, because they have some bigger difficulty ramp up. And this is it for this video here. I wish you good luck in the Abattoir of Zir. Let me know what you think about it, if you have more feedback as well. Personally, I'm definitely expecting more changes to Abattoir of Zir, and I guess now is the time to also make that feedback heard. So let's see what Blizzard will do. Hope you liked this video, and I'll see you guys next time.